My name is Georgine, and I am 32 years old. For most of my life, I struggled with my weight and self-image, enduring cruel taunts from my own brother, while my mother not only allowed it, but encouraged it. After years of hard work transforming my health, I never expected my mother would demand I quit exercising because my fitness was making my brother look bad by comparison. Before I tell you how my own mother tried to sabotage my health journey, let me know where you're watching from in the comments and hit that subscribe button if you've ever had to stand up to toxic family members. I grew up in a modest suburban home outside of Boston with my mother and younger brother Jason. From my earliest memories, it was clear that Jason was the golden child. My mother doted on him constantly while regarding me with a critical eye that never seemed to soften no matter how hard I tried to please her. The favoritism was evident in countless small ways that accumulated over time. When Jason wanted the latest video game console, my mother would somehow find the money despite our tight budget. When I needed new clothes because I had outgrown mine, I was told we couldn't afford them. Jason received special meals prepared with care, while I was expected to just eat whatever was available and be grateful. As a young child, I didn't fully understand what was happening. I just knew that something was wrong with me that made me less lovable than my brother. I remember sitting at the dinner table at age 8, watching my mother cut the crusts off Jason's sandwich exactly the way he liked it, while minutes earlier she had scolded me for asking if I could have more apple slices. "Stop being so demanding, Georgine," she snapped. "The world does not revolve around you." But it did revolve around Jason. His smallest achievements were celebrated like major victories, while my accomplishments were acknowledged with a distracted nod at best. When I brought home straight A's on my report card in 4th grade, my mother barely glanced at it. That same year, when Jason improved from a D to a C in math, my mother took him out for ice cream and put his test paper on the refrigerator. The constant emotional neglect took its toll. By the time I was 10, I had discovered that food could provide the comfort my mother never did. I began sneaking snacks into my room, finding solace in the momentary pleasure of cookies and chips. The weight gain started slowly but steadily. Middle school brought new levels of torment as Jason, now aware of society's cruel focus on body size, found my increasing weight to be the perfect target. "Move it, whale," he would say, pushing past me in the hallway of our home. "You're blocking the entire doorway." My mother's response to these comments ranged from pretending not to hear them to actually laughing along. Sometimes she would add her own barbs. "Well, Georgine, if you didn't eat so many snacks, maybe you wouldn't have this problem," she would say with fake concern in her voice. By 8th grade, I had become the target of bullies at school as well. I started making excuses to stay home, feigning illness to avoid the hallways where I knew I would be mocked. My grades began to suffer. I stopped raising my hand in class, trying to become invisible. But at 5'5" and 200 pounds, invisibility was impossible. High school was when my health truly began to suffer. My pediatrician expressed concern about my blood pressure and pre-diabetic markers during a checkup. When she suggested seeing a nutritionist, my mother nodded in the office, but later dismissed it as unnecessary expense. "You just need willpower," she told me on the drive home. "Stop eating so much. It is not complicated." But it was complicated. The cycle of emotional eating followed by shame, followed by more emotional eating, had become deeply ingrained. I did not know how to break it, especially while living in a house where my brother continued his relentless campaign of mockery with my mother's tacit approval. "No one will ever ask you to prom," Jason taunted during my sophomore year. "Who would want to be seen with someone who probably needs 2 chairs?" My mother, sitting at the kitchen table during this exchange, simply turned the page of her magazine and said, "Well, boys do care about appearance, Georgine. That is just reality." By senior year, I weighed 250 pounds. My social life was non-existent. I had a few acquaintances, but no close friends. I spent lunches in the library, eating quickly in a bathroom stall beforehand to avoid the cafeteria. My only focus was maintaining decent enough grades to get into a college far away from my family. When acceptance letters finally arrived, I chose the university farthest from home that had offered me admission. It was a state school in California, not particularly prestigious, but it represented something precious to me: freedom. The day I graduated high school, I felt the first genuine hope I had experienced in years. In just 3 months, I would be 3,000 miles away from the daily torment of my family home. As I packed that summer, I allowed myself to imagine a different kind of life, one where I might find acceptance, or at the very least escape the constant criticism and comparison. The day I left for college was the first time I could remember feeling genuinely excited about my future. As the plane took off from Boston, Logan International Airport, I pressed my face against the window and watched my past life grow smaller and smaller until it disappeared beneath the clouds. California welcomed me with sunshine and a sense of possibility that felt foreign but wonderful. My dorm room was small, but it was mine, a space where Jason couldn't barge in with cruel comments, where my mother couldn't look at me with that mixture of disappointment and disgust that had become so familiar. My roommate Taylor was nothing like I had expected or feared. Where I anticipated judgment, I found warmth. She was athletic and outgoing, the kind of girl who would have never spoken to me in high school, but she greeted me with genuine kindness. "You are going to love it here," she said, helping me unpack. "College is where you get to reinvent yourself if you want to." Those words stuck with me, though I didn't immediately act on them. The habits of hiding and shame were too deeply ingrained to disappear overnight. For the first semester, I focused on academics, finding comfort in the anonymity of large lecture halls, where no one knew me as the fat girl or Jason's big sister. But Taylor was persistent in her friendly way. She never pushed too hard, but she consistently invited me to join her for various activities. "A bunch of us are going to try this new yoga class at the rec center," she mentioned casually one evening in February. "Nothing serious, just beginners. You should come with us." I had a million reasons to say no. I did not have workout clothes that fit properly. I would look ridiculous. Everyone would stare. I would not be able to do the poses. But something about the casual way she asked, as if it were the most normal thing in the world for someone like me to try yoga, made me hesitate before refusing. "I have never done yoga before," I admitted. "None of us have," Taylor laughed. "That is why we are doing the beginner class. We will all be equally terrible together." And somehow that was enough to get me there. Walking into that first class was terrifying. I positioned my mat in the back corner, trying to become as invisible as possible. But as the instructor led us through gentle movements, something unexpected happened. For the first time, I was not thinking about how my body looked, but rather what it could do. Some poses were challenging, but others felt surprisingly good, creating space and length in a body that had spent years trying to curl in on itself and disappear. When the class ended, I realized with shock that I had enjoyed it. Not just endured it, but actually found pleasure in movement. This revelation was so foreign that I barely knew what to do with it. "That wasn't so bad, right?" Taylor asked as we rolled up our mats. "It was actually kind of nice," I admitted. From that small beginning grew a tentative new relationship with physical activity. I started attending the yoga class weekly, then twice weekly. Taylor never made a big deal out of it, never commented on my appearance or weight, just continued to extend casual invitations that made it easier to say yes than no. By sophomore year, I had added walks around campus to my routine. Nothing intense, just 20 minutes of fresh air between classes. Junior year brought a gentle introduction to the campus gym, where I discovered the elliptical machine was kind to my joints while still providing satisfying movement. Alongside these physical changes came changes in my eating habits. Without my mother's critical gaze or Jason's mockery, meals became simply fuel rather than emotional battlegrounds. I started paying attention to how different foods made me feel, noticing that vegetables and lean proteins gave me energy for longer study sessions, while heavy processed foods left me sluggish and foggy. Graduation came faster than I could have imagined. I had secured an entry-level marketing position with a mid-sized firm in San Diego, which meant I could stay in California. The thought of returning to Boston, to the orbit of my family, filled me with dread. I had spoken to my mother only monthly during college, brief surface-level conversations that revealed nothing of my evolving life. My new job came with health insurance that covered nutritionist visits. For the first time, I had professional guidance about balanced eating rather than the shame-based restrictions my mother had tried to impose. My nutritionist Amelia emphasized sustainable changes over quick fixes. Health is a lifelong journey, she told me during our first session. We are not looking for perfection. We are looking for better choices more often. Under her guidance, I began to heal my relationship with food. No foods were forbidden, which paradoxically made it easier to choose nourishing options most of the time. When I did enjoy treats, it was without the guilt and secrecy that had previously turned one cookie into an entire package. By the time I turned 27, 5 years after graduating college, my physical transformation was significant. I had lost 75 pounds gradually in a way that felt sustainable. More importantly, I had gained strength, endurance, and a sense of capability in my body that I had never experienced before. The gym had become my sanctuary, a place where I measured success, not by the scale, but by what my body could accomplish. The first time I ran a full mile without stopping, I cried with pride. When I learned to deadlift with proper form, I felt a power that transcended physical strength. I had created a life in California that felt like mine in a way no previous experience ever had. I had friends who knew nothing of the bullied, shame-filled girl from Boston. They knew only Georgine, the marketing professional with the ready laugh and newfound confidence. I had dates, some good, some awkward, but all approached from a place of self-worth, rather than desperate gratitude for any attention. For 8 years, I had maintained only minimal contact with my family, holiday phone calls, the occasional birthday card. I sent gifts to my grandmother, the one family member who had always shown me unconditional love, but I had not set foot in my mother's house since the day I left for college. That changed when my grandmother turned 80. The invitation arrived by mail, my mother's handwriting on the envelope immediately transporting me back to childhood anxieties. Inside was a formal invitation to a birthday celebration, along with a handwritten note from my grandmother expressing her hope that I would attend. I could not refuse her. Despite the knot of dread that formed in my stomach at the thought of seeing my family again, I booked a flight to Boston for the first time in 8 years. I would stay with my grandmother, rather than at my mother's house, a small boundary that felt important to maintain. I requested time off work, packed my suitcase, and prepared to face the past I had so thoroughly fled. The flight to Boston was filled with anxiety. I had managed to build a life 3,000 miles away from my toxic family dynamic, and now I was voluntarily flying back into it. As the plane began its descent, my stomach tightened with each foot of altitude we lost. I had arranged to rent a car at the airport, wanting the independence to come and go on my own terms. As I drove the familiar streets toward my childhood neighborhood, memories flooded back unwelcome, bringing with them echoes of old insecurities. My grandmother lived in a small, well-kept ranch house about 10 minutes from my mother's home. When she opened the door, her face lit up with genuine joy, immediately easing some of my tension. "Georgine," she exclaimed, opening her arms, "let me look at you." She pulled back from our hug, keeping her hands on my shoulders as she took me in. Her eyes widened slightly, but unlike my mother's perpetually critical gaze, her surprise held only warmth. "You look wonderful, dear. So healthy and strong. California must agree with you." That simple, authentic reaction was balm to my nervous soul. I helped her prepare a light lunch, catching her up on my life in San Diego, my job, my friends. She listened with real interest, asking questions that showed she cared about the person I had become, not just the granddaughter she remembered. "Your mother and Jason are coming for dinner," she mentioned casually as we cleared the lunch dishes. "I hope that is all right. They are very excited to see you." I doubted that very much, but smiled and nodded, unwilling to burden my grandmother with family tensions on her birthday weekend. I spent the afternoon helping her prepare for the small dinner party, chopping vegetables and setting the table, all while mentally bracing myself for the evening ahead. When the doorbell rang at 6 o'clock, I took a deep breath and reminded myself that I was not the same vulnerable girl who had left Boston 8 years ago. I had built a life I was proud of. I had nothing to prove to these people. My mother entered first, arms laden with an unnecessarily elaborate flower arrangement that seemed designed to draw attention to her generosity. She stopped abruptly when she saw me, her eyes making a quick assessment from head to toe. Georgine, she said, her tone revealing nothing. You have lost weight. Not hello. Not I have missed you. Just an immediate comment on my appearance as if nothing had changed in 8 years. Hello, Mother, I replied deliberately, keeping my voice pleasant. It is good to see you too. Jason followed behind her, and his reaction was far less controlled. He had gained significant weight since I had last seen him, his formerly athletic frame now soft and rounded. His eyes narrowed as he took in my transformed appearance. Wow, someone has been starving herself, he said with a smirk that failed to disguise his discomfort. Trying to impress someone? I have been taking care of my health, I replied evenly. You look well, Jason. My grandmother, perhaps sensing the immediate tension, ushered everyone to the living room, offering drinks and making cheerful conversation about her birthday party scheduled for the following day. I contributed when appropriate, but otherwise observed the familiar dynamics with new perspective. My mother continued to fuss over Jason in small ways, asking if his chair was comfortable, if his drink was the right temperature. Meanwhile, she regarded me with a strange mixture of assessment and something that looked almost like resentment. So, what exactly did you do? She asked abruptly during a lull in conversation. Surgery. I blinked at the accusation, thinly veiled as a question. No, Mother. Just gradual changes in diet and exercise over several years. She replied skeptically. It seems very extreme. You need to be careful about eating disorders. They run in families, you know. They did not in fact run in our family, but before I could respond, my grandmother smoothly changed the subject, asking about my marketing work. I was grateful for her intervention, recognizing it as the first of what would likely be many such moments during my stay. The birthday party the next day brought extended family members I hadn't seen in years. Aunts, uncles, and cousins all reacted to my appearance with varying degrees of tact. I almost didn't recognize you, exclaimed Aunt Paula, embracing me. You look absolutely wonderful, so healthy and happy. Your face has changed so much, observed Uncle Frank. You have your grandmother's cheekbones now that we can see them. While these comments were well-intentioned if somewhat clumsy, I noticed how each compliment seemed to darken Jason's mood. He hovered near the food table, loading his plate repeatedly and glaring in my direction whenever someone remarked on my transformation. My mother stayed close to him, periodically touching his arm or bringing him specific treats from the buffet. Have you tried the spinach dip? It is your favorite, she would say, loud enough for nearby relatives to hear, as if to remind everyone that she knew her son's preferences intimately. The tension built throughout the afternoon until it finally erupted when my grandmother opened her gifts. I had sent a digital photo frame preloaded with pictures of her with various family members over the years, including several of her and me from my childhood. When she opened it and began scrolling through the images, exclaiming with delight at each one, Jason suddenly stood up. Is that all we are going to talk about today? How amazing Georgine is, how thoughtful, how different she looks. His voice was loud, cutting through the pleasant chatter of the party. Some of us have been here the whole time, not just showing up after 8 years expecting a parade. An uncomfortable silence fell over the gathering. My grandmother looked distressed, her hands freezing on the photo frame. Jason, dear, my mother said quickly, you know that is not what is happening. Everyone is just surprised to see Georgine after so long. Yeah, well, maybe if she hadn't abandoned her family, it wouldn't be such a shock, he muttered, but loud enough for everyone to hear. I felt heat rising in my face, a mixture of embarrassment and anger. Before I could respond, my grandmother spoke up with uncharacteristic firmness. This is my birthday celebration, she said clearly. I am delighted to have all my family here, especially Georgine, who has traveled so far to be with us. I would appreciate it if we could enjoy this time together without conflict. Jason stormed out of the room, my mother hurrying after him with a worried backward glance. The party resumed with forced cheerfulness, but the incident had left its mark on the atmosphere. Later, as guests were leaving, my grandmother took my hand. I have a doctor's appointment on Monday, she said. Would you mind driving me? My eyes aren't what they used to be, especially for those bright lights in the medical complex. I immediately agreed, suspecting this might have been part of her motivation for inviting me for this visit. As the last guests departed and I helped her clean up, she mentioned casually, "I wouldn't mind if you wanted to extend your stay a bit. The house gets quiet with just me." Looking at her hopeful expression, I found myself agreeing before I had fully thought it through. My boss had been understanding about my time off, and I had capable team members who could cover my projects for a few more days. More importantly, I was concerned about my grandmother. She seemed more frail than I remembered, and the idea of spending additional time with her was appealing despite the complication of being closer to my mother and Jason. "I would love to stay a bit longer," I told her. "Let me make some calls tomorrow to arrange it." That decision, made with the best of intentions, would set in motion a chain of events I could never have anticipated. The next few days fell into an unexpected rhythm. I would wake early, go for a run around my grandmother's peaceful neighborhood, then return to make us breakfast. The simple routine felt good, grounding me in healthy habits, even while back in the environment that had once been so toxic for me. My grandmother watched with interest as I prepared oatmeal with fresh berries and nuts, instead of the sugary cereal that had been a staple of my childhood. She asked thoughtful questions about my choices, not with judgment, but with genuine curiosity. "I have been reading about inflammation and diet," she confessed one morning. "My arthritis has been getting worse, and my doctor suggested I might look at what I am eating." I seized the opportunity to share what I had learned from my nutritionist. "There are definitely foods that can help with inflammation," I explained, showing her how I added turmeric and ginger to my morning smoothies. "It is not a miracle cure, but many people find it helps reduce pain." She nodded thoughtfully. "Would you mind making a shopping list for me? Just some basics that might be good to try?" That conversation led to a trip to the local farmers market, something I doubted my grandmother had ever done. We wandered among the stalls, selecting fresh vegetables and talking to local vendors about their products. It was one of the most enjoyable mornings I could remember spending with any family member. Monday brought the doctor's appointment that had prompted my extended stay. What I had assumed would be a routine checkup turned out to be more serious. My grandmother's blood pressure was dangerously high, and her blood work indicated concerning levels of cholesterol and blood sugar. "We need to make some significant changes, Mrs. Sullivan," the doctor explained kindly but firmly. "Your current numbers put you at high risk for heart attack and stroke. Diet and exercise modifications are essential, and we may need to adjust your medications as well." In the car afterward, my grandmother was quiet, processing the information. Finally, she said, "I guess those dietary changes we were discussing are more important than I realized." "I can help you," I offered immediately. "I am not a medical expert, but I have learned a lot about healthy eating over the years. We can work on this together." She squeezed my hand gratefully. "I would appreciate that very much, dear." That afternoon, we cleaned out her pantry, identifying the high-sodium soups and sugary snacks that had become her dietary staples since my grandfather had passed away 5 years earlier. I made a comprehensive shopping list of heart-healthy alternatives, and we spent time planning simple meals that she could prepare easily once I returned to California. Word of our activities somehow reached my mother, who began calling daily with increasing urgency in her voice. "What exactly are you doing over there?" she demanded during one such call. "Your grandmother has eaten the same way for 80 years. She does not need you coming in and changing everything." "Her doctor has specifically recommended dietary changes," I explained patiently. "Her blood pressure and cholesterol are dangerously high." "Doctors are always saying things like that," my mother dismissed. "They just want to sell more pills." The irrationality of this statement left me momentarily speechless. Before I could formulate a response, she continued, "Anyway, Jason and I are coming over for dinner tonight. I will bring the food so you do not need to worry about cooking." It wasn't a request, but a declaration. I glanced at my grandmother, who had heard the conversation on speakerphone, and gave a small, resigned shrug. "That would be lovely, dear," she said. "We will be there at 6, my mother stated, and hung up. I spent the afternoon helping my grandmother sort through old photographs, trying to ignore my growing anxiety about the evening ahead. When the doorbell rang precisely at 6, I took a deep breath and went to answer it. My mother stood on the porch with multiple grocery bags, while Jason loitered behind her, looking bored and irritable. I stepped aside to let them in, noticing immediately that Jason had continued to gain weight since the birthday party just a week ago. "I brought all of your favorites," my mother announced, heading straight for the kitchen and beginning to unpack containers. Fried chicken from Parker's potato salad, mac and cheese, and chocolate cake for dessert. It was indeed the meal she had always prepared for special occasions during my childhood, though it had never actually been my favorite, but rather Jason's. I watched as she arranged the food on serving dishes, noting with concern the oil pooling under the chicken and the heavy mayo-based dressing on the potato salad. "That is very kind, but Grandma is actually trying to reduce saturated fat and sodium right now," I said carefully. "Her doctor has recommended some dietary changes." My mother's hands paused momentarily in their task before continuing with more forceful movements. "One meal is not going to kill her. Besides, food is about more than just nutrition. It is about family and tradition." My grandmother entered the kitchen, then effectively ending the discussion. "Everything looks delicious," she said diplomatically. "Why don't we all sit down?" Dinner was tense despite my grandmother's valiant attempts at pleasant conversation. I took small portions of the high-fat foods and filled the rest of my plate with the salad I had prepared earlier, which earned me a pointed look from my mother and a snort from Jason. "Still on your extreme diet, I see," he commented through a mouthful of mac and cheese. "It is not extreme," I replied evenly. "Just balanced." "Seems pretty extreme to me," my mother interjected. "You used to love these foods. Now suddenly you are too good for them." "It is not about being too good for anything," I explained, trying to keep my tone neutral. "It is about making choices that support my health." "Well, your choices are making other people uncomfortable," she said sharply, nodding toward Jason, who was now shoveling food into his mouth with increased agitation. "Not everyone has the luxury of obsessing over every calorie." I stared at her, genuinely confused. How are my food choices making anyone uncomfortable? I am not commenting on what anyone else is eating. "You do not have to comment," Jason jumped in. "Your whole superior attitude says it all. Showing up here after all these years suddenly all skinny and judging everyone." "I am not judging anyone," I protested, feeling the conversation spiraling beyond my control. "I am just trying to take care of myself and help Grandma with her doctor's recommendations." My mother's next words landed like a slap. "The truth is, your behavior is incredibly selfish, Georgine. Do you ever think about how your dramatic transformation affects your brother? How it makes him feel to have his sister suddenly showing off and making him look bad by comparison?" I was momentarily struck speechless. Was she actually suggesting that my health journey was somehow an attack on Jason? That is the most ridiculous thing I have ever heard. I finally managed. "My decisions about my health have absolutely nothing to do with Jason." "Of course they do," my mother insisted, her voice rising. "Everything in a family affects everyone else. Your extreme exercise routine and restrictive diet are making your brother feel inadequate. It is creating an unfair comparison." My grandmother tried to intervene. "I think perhaps we should change the subject." But my mother was on a roll now, years of resentment spilling out. "It was bad enough when you abandoned the family to move across the country. But now you come back looking like this." She gestured dismissively at me, "and expect everyone to praise you for it. Meanwhile, your brother, who has loyally remained close to family, feels completely undermined." Jason nodded vigorously, his expression a mixture of self-pity and vindication. "So, what exactly are you suggesting?" I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. "That I should have stayed unhealthy and miserable to make Jason feel better about himself?" My mother leaned forward, her eyes hard. "I am suggesting that while you are here, you could show some consideration for your family's feelings. Stop with the morning runs and the salads and the constant water drinking. Stop showing off and making the rest of us feel bad." I laughed in disbelief. "You cannot be serious." "I am absolutely serious," she replied. "In fact, I have taken steps to make it easier for you to comply. I called your gym in California and canceled your membership." My blood ran cold. "You did what?" "I found the membership card in your wallet while you were out running yesterday. Since you used my address as your emergency contact years ago, they accepted me as an authorized person on the account." I explained that you no longer needed the service. The violation was so extreme I could barely process it. She had gone through my personal belongings, accessed my wallet, and canceled a service I paid for without my knowledge or consent. That is completely unacceptable, I said, my voice shaking with anger. You had absolutely no right. I had every right, she countered. I am your mother, and I am trying to restore harmony to this family. I also took the liberty of disposing of those protein powders and supplements you brought. They are unnatural and probably dangerous anyway. I stood up so quickly my chair nearly toppled backward. You went through my things and threw away my property. Have you lost your mind? Jason smirked throughout this exchange, clearly enjoying my distress. My mother's expression remained righteously indignant, as if she were the reasonable one in this scenario. Sit down, Georgine, she commanded. You are being dramatic. I am simply trying to level the playing field while you are visiting. It is the least you can do after abandoning your family for all these years. My grandmother's face had gone pale during this exchange. She reached across the table and placed her hand on my arm. Denise, she said to my mother, her voice firmer than I had ever heard it, what you have done is inappropriate. You had no right to go through Georgine's belongings or cancel her gym membership. My mother looked genuinely shocked at being challenged by her own mother. I was only thinking of the family as a whole, she protested. Jason has been feeling terrible about himself ever since she arrived looking like this. Then perhaps Jason should examine his own choices rather than expecting his sister to diminish herself, my grandmother replied with unexpected sharpness. Jason pushed his chair back roughly. Of course you would take her side, he spat. Everyone always does now that she is skinny and perfect. My mother stood up too, placing a protective hand on Jason's shoulder. This is exactly the problem. She comes back after all these years and immediately disrupts the entire family dynamic. Now even you are turning against us, she said accusingly to my grandmother. She turned to me, her expression hardening. If you insist on continuing this selfish behavior, then prove your commitment to this family right now. Sit down and eat a proper portion of everything I brought, including dessert. Show us that you can stop this obsessive control just long enough to be part of this family again. She pushed the platter of fried chicken toward me, her eyes challenging. It was such a bizarre power play that I almost laughed, but the seriousness of her expression stopped me. She genuinely believed she was making a reasonable request. This conversation has gone completely off the rails, I said, stepping away from the table. I am not going to eat specific foods to prove my loyalty to you. That is absurd and controlling. Then you are choosing your vanity over your family, she declared. If that is your decision, I do not think you should continue this visit. You are clearly having a negative influence on your grandmother as well. At that, my grandmother stood up, her small frame somehow commanding. This is my house. Denise, and Georgine is welcome here for as long as she wishes to stay. If anyone should leave, it is someone who thinks it is acceptable to go through another adult's personal belongings and make decisions about their life without consent. The shock on my mother's face would have been comical in any other circumstance. She was not accustomed to being challenged, especially by her own mother, who had typically been conflict avoidant throughout my childhood. Fine, my mother snapped, gathering her purse. Come on, Jason. We are clearly not welcome here tonight. Jason stood, his face flushed with anger, and followed her to the door. Before leaving, my mother turned back. If you continue helping her with this extreme lifestyle, Mother, I will not be able to drive you to your appointments anymore. I cannot support this behavior. After they left, the house fell into blessed silence. I sat heavily in the nearest chair, adrenaline still coursing through my system. I am so sorry, my grandmother said, sitting beside me and taking my hand. I had no idea she would react that way. I squeezed her hand. It is not your fault, but I am beginning to understand why you never intervened when I was growing up. She looked down, shame evident in her expression. She has always been very forceful, even as a child. I found it easier to give in than to face her anger. That was a failing on my part, and I am sorry for it. We cleaned up the dinner mess together, wrapping the uneaten food and storing it away. As I wiped down the table, a wave of anxiety hit me so strongly that I had to grip the edge to steady myself. The thought of returning to an unhealthy lifestyle, even temporarily, triggered profound fear. I had worked so hard to change my relationship with my body, to build habits that supported rather than undermined my well-being. The idea that my mother would try to sabotage that progress was both infuriating and deeply frightening. "Are you all right?" my grandmother asked, noticing my distress. "Not really," I admitted. Finding out that she went through my things canceled my membership, threw away my property. It is bringing back a lot of bad memories. The controlling behavior, the favoritism. I thought I had put all that behind me. My grandmother nodded sadly. "Your mother has always struggled with control issues, but this is worse than I have seen before. I wonder if your transformation threatens her in some way." That night, I lay awake for hours, replaying the confrontation and trying to make sense of my mother's irrational demands. The more I thought about it, the more I realized this was not really about Jason's feelings. This was about my mother's inability to accept that I had escaped her control and created a life where her approval was no longer necessary for my happiness. The next morning, I woke with a sense of resolve. This visit had made one thing abundantly clear. The distance I had maintained from my family for the past 8 years had been not just necessary, but vital for my well-being. The morning after that disastrous dinner, I woke up feeling both shaken and determined. My mind raced with the implications of my mother's actions, not just the immediate invasion of privacy, but what it revealed about her fundamental inability to respect my autonomy. I reached for my phone and called Taylor, now my closest friend who had moved to San Diego a few years after me. "She did what?" Taylor exclaimed after I recounted the previous evening's events. "That is beyond inappropriate. That is actually disturbing behavior." "I know." I sighed, stepping outside onto my grandmother's porch to ensure our conversation remained private. "The worst part is she genuinely believes she was justified. Like my health journey is somehow an attack on Jason and the family." Taylor was quiet for a moment. "Georgine, this sounds like it goes beyond normal family dysfunction. Have you considered talking to a professional about this? Someone who specializes in family dynamics?" The suggestion caught me off guard. Despite years of working on my physical health, I had never seriously considered therapy for the emotional scars my family had inflicted. But Taylor's words resonated. This situation felt too complex to navigate alone. "That might actually be a good idea," I admitted. "But I am only here for another week. I am not sure what a therapist could accomplish in such a short time." "Maybe look for someone who could do a family session, or at least meet with someone who could give you some strategies for setting boundaries during the rest of your visit." After we hung up, I did some research on my phone and found a therapist specializing in family systems who had availability for a consultation that afternoon. I booked the appointment, then called my grandmother's doctor to reschedule her follow-up to the same medical complex so I could handle both appointments in one trip. Dr. Matthews, the therapist, was a woman in her 50s with a calm demeanor that immediately put me at ease. I gave her a condensed version of my family history and the current situation. "What you are describing contains several concerning patterns," she noted. "Your mother appears to have difficulty seeing you as a separate person with your own needs and identity. Instead, she views your choices through the lens of how they affect her and the family system she has established with your brother in the favored role." "That sounds about right," I agreed. "She actually seems angry that I got healthy, as if I did it specifically to upset Jason." "In her mind, that may genuinely be how she perceives it," Dr. Matthews explained. "When someone is deeply enmeshed in unhealthy family dynamics, any change threatens the entire system. Your transformation represents independence and self-determination, which challenges the control she's accustomed to having." We discussed strategies for maintaining my boundaries during the remainder of my visit, and Dr. Matthews suggested a family session with my mother and possibly Jason. "I think that would be valuable, but I honestly cannot see my mother agreeing to it," I told her. "She does not believe there is anything wrong with her behavior." "Would you be comfortable if I called and invited her? Sometimes people are more receptive when the invitation comes from a professional." I hesitated, then nodded. What did I have to lose? To my surprise, my mother agreed to meet with Dr. Matthews the following day. though she refused to bring Jason, saying he was too upset by recent events. The session went about as well as I had expected, which was not well at all. My mother spent the first 20 minutes listing all the ways I had disappointed the family, from choosing a college across the country to becoming obsessed with appearance, to upsetting Jason with my showing off, when Dr. Matthews gently suggested that my health journey was about well-being rather than appearance, and that adults are entitled to make their own life choices. My mother became increasingly defensive. "You do not understand our family," she insisted. "Georgine has always been difficult, always wanting special attention. Now she has found a new way to do it by making these extreme changes and flaunting them in front of her brother, who has struggled with his weight." "Ms. Anderson," Dr. Matthews said calmly, "from what Georgine has shared, it appears that Jason frequently made cruel comments about her weight when she was younger. Were you aware of this behavior?" My mother waved her hand dismissively. "Kids tease each other. It is normal sibling behavior. Georgine was always too sensitive." I felt a familiar knot forming in my throat, the one that had accompanied so many tears during my childhood. Dr. Matthews must have noticed, because she redirected the conversation. "Let's focus on the present situation. Do you understand why going through Georgine's belongings and canceling her gym membership without permission was inappropriate?" My mother's face hardened. "I did what was necessary to protect my family. Sometimes as a parent, you have to make difficult decisions." "Georgine is 32 years old," Dr. Matthews pointed out. "She is not a child requiring parental intervention." "She will always be my child," my mother countered. "And as long as she is under my influence, I will do what is best for the entire family, not just her selfish desires." The session continued in this circular fashion until my mother finally stood up, declaring, "This is a waste of time. You have clearly already decided to take Georgine's side without understanding our family's needs." She left without looking back, leaving me sitting there with a mixture of disappointment and resignation. "I am sorry," Dr. Matthews said after a moment. "Family therapy only works when all parties are willing to examine their contributions to the dynamic." "It was worth trying," I said, though I had known deep down this would be the outcome. My mother had never acknowledged her behavior as problematic, and a single therapy session wasn't going to change that. As I drove back to my grandmother's house, I made a difficult decision. I could not continue to stay in Boston under these circumstances. My mother's behavior was escalating, and I needed to protect my physical and mental health. Back at my grandmother's, I explained the situation as gently as I could. To my surprise, she nodded in understanding. "I have been thinking about this too," she said. "Your mother has always been controlling, but this is beyond anything I have seen from her before. I worry about you staying here with this tension." "I feel terrible leaving you," I admitted, "especially with your health concerns." My grandmother took my hand. "I have been thinking about that as well. My friend Judith moved to an assisted living community last year. She loves it there. They have activities, transportation to appointments, and healthy meal options. I have been reluctant to consider it because your mother insists I do not need that level of care, but after seeing her behavior this week—" Her words trailed off, but I understood the implication. My mother's controlling behavior extended to her own mother as well. "Would you like me to help you look into some options?" I offered. "I would appreciate that very much." She nodded. Perhaps it is time I made some changes too. Over the next 2 days, we researched assisted living communities in the area, finding several that offered the level of independence my grandmother wanted with the medical support she needed. We scheduled tours for the following week, and I changed my flight to stay through those appointments. I also made another significant decision. I found a month-to-month rental apartment near my grandmother's neighborhood and secured it with a deposit. I would need to return to California to pack up my essentials and make arrangements with my employer for remote work, but I was determined to stay in Boston long enough to help my grandmother transition to a safer, healthier living situation. When my mother discovered these plans through a casual comment from my grandmother, her reaction was explosive. She showed up at the house unannounced, bursting through the door with a level of fury I hadn't witnessed before. "How dare you try to put Mom in a home behind my back?" she shouted. "After all these years of me taking care of her while you were off living your selfish California life." "It is not behind your back," I replied, struggling to maintain my composure. "Grandma made this decision herself after looking at her options. The communities we are considering are nothing like what you are implying. They are lovely apartment complexes with support services." "She was perfectly fine until you showed up with your extreme ideas," my mother spat. "First the diet changes, now this. You have been here 2 weeks and suddenly you think you know what is best for everyone." My grandmother, who had been sitting quietly, stood up with determination. "Denise, that is enough. This is my decision, not Georgine's. I have been considering this move for over a year, but was hesitant to upset you. The truth is, I need more support than you can provide with your work schedule, and I would enjoy the social aspects of community living." My mother turned to her, her expression shifting to wounded disappointment. "So you are choosing her over me too, after everything I have done for you?" "This is not about choosing anyone over anyone else," my grandmother said firmly. "This is about what is best for my health and well-being at this stage of my life." My mother's face contorted with anger again. "I will fight this. She has clearly manipulated you while you are vulnerable. I will talk to your doctor. I will contest this legally if I have to." The threat hung in the air, its implications chilling. Would my mother actually try to claim my grandmother was incompetent to make her own decisions? The thought was horrifying, but not entirely surprising given her recent behavior. "Mom," I said, using the more familiar term deliberately, "I understand you are upset, but threatening Grandma is not appropriate. She is a competent adult making informed decisions about her own life." "You have no idea what you are talking about," my mother snapped. "You swoop in after 8 years and think you understand everything. You have always been selfish, Georgine, but this is a new low even for you." She stormed out, slamming the door behind her with enough force to rattle the windows. My grandmother sank back into her chair, looking suddenly exhausted. "I am so sorry," I said, sitting beside her. "I never meant to create this conflict." "You didn't?" she assured me, patting my hand. "This conflict has been brewing for years. I have allowed your mother to make decisions for me because it was easier than fighting. But seeing how she has treated you, how she continues to treat you, has made me realize I need to stand up for myself too." The next morning brought a text from Jason, the first direct communication I had received from him during my visit. "Hope you're happy now that you've completely destroyed this family. Mom is devastated and it's all your fault. Some of us actually care about family loyalty." I didn't respond. There was nothing I could say that would penetrate the narrative he and my mother had constructed, where I was the villain disrupting their perfect family harmony, rather than someone simply trying to live a healthy life and support my grandmother in doing the same. Instead, I focused my energy on helping my grandmother prepare for her transition. We toured 3 assisted living communities, and she fell in love with the second one, Riverside Gardens. It offered private apartments, transportation to medical appointments, healthy meal options in a communal dining room, and numerous activities from water aerobics to book clubs. "I think this is the one," she said as we left the tour. "I can imagine being happy here." We completed the application that afternoon, and I used some of my savings to cover the deposit, ensuring she could move in within 30 days. The facility director, sensing the urgency of the situation, expedited the process as much as possible. With my grandmother's living arrangements secured, I returned to my rented apartment to pack for my trip back to California. I would need to return to San Diego for at least 2 weeks to pack up my essentials and make arrangements with my employer before coming back to Boston to help with my grandmother's move. As I was folding clothes into my suitcase, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. It was Mr. Patterson, the family law attorney I had consulted briefly about my grandmother's situation. "Ms. Anderson, I wanted to let you know that your mother has contacted our office seeking information about guardianship proceedings for your grandmother." My stomach dropped. She actually went through with the threat. "She made some inquiries," he confirmed. "But I should tell you that from what you've shared about your grandmother's condition and mental capacity, such a petition would be unlikely to succeed. Still, I wanted you to be aware." I thanked him for the information and immediately called my grandmother to warn her. Together, we decided she should schedule an appointment with her primary care physician to document her cognitive capacity, creating a record that could be used if needed to counter any legal challenges. The day before my flight back to California, I received a call from my grandmother, her voice tense with suppressed anger. "Your mother just left," she said. "She came by with some paperwork she wanted me to sign, claiming it was related to my healthcare proxy. When I read it, it was actually a document giving her power of attorney over all my affairs. She tried to trick you into signing that." I was aghast at the deception. "Yes," my grandmother confirmed. When I refused and told her I had already updated my legal documents with Mr. Patterson, she became very upset. She accused me of turning against the family and said some very hurtful things about you manipulating me. I felt a surge of protective anger. "I am so sorry she put you through that. Are you okay?" "I am fine," she assured me. "In fact, this has only made me more certain about my decision to move. I love your mother, but I cannot allow her to control my life this way." Her strength in that moment moved me deeply. At 80 years old, my grandmother was finding the courage to set boundaries that had eluded her for decades. The following day, as I prepared to leave for the airport, my mother made one final attempt to assert control. She showed up at my grandmother's house unannounced, Jason in tow. "We need to talk before you leave," she announced, walking in without waiting for an invitation. "This has gone far enough." I steeled myself for another confrontation. "I am listening." She sat down on the couch, arranging her face into an expression of maternal concern that I now recognized as entirely performative. "I have given this a lot of thought," she began. "I understand that you have developed certain habits in California that are important to you. I am willing to accept that you want to continue your exercise routine and special diet." The concession was so unexpected that I was momentarily speechless. "However," she continued, "I need you to understand that your choices have consequences for this family. Jason has been deeply hurt by your behavior, and as his mother, I need to protect him too." Jason nodded solemnly beside her, playing his assigned role perfectly. "So I am proposing a compromise," my mother went on. "You can continue your health regimen, and I will not interfere with Mom's decision about the assisted living facility on one condition." I waited, already certain that whatever followed would be unreasonable. "You need to stop encouraging Mom to change her diet and lifestyle. No more talking about inflammation or heart health or whatever other fads you have picked up. And you need to maintain a low profile when you visit. No running in the neighborhood where people can see you, no talking about your gym routine or California lifestyle. Keep it private so it doesn't continue to make your brother feel inadequate by comparison." I stared at her, trying to comprehend the twisted logic behind this proposal. She was essentially asking me to hide my healthy habits to protect Jason's feelings about his unhealthy ones. "That is not a reasonable request," I said finally. "I cannot control how Jason feels about his own choices, and I will not stop discussing health information that could benefit Grandma just to maintain some artificial family harmony." My mother's facade of reasonableness instantly crumbled. "Then you leave me no choice. If you insist on this destructive path, you are no longer welcome in this family. I cannot have someone so selfish influencing my mother and undermining my son." It was the ultimate threat, the one she had wielded throughout my childhood whenever I showed any sign of independence. But this time, instead of fear, I felt an unexpected sense of clarity and release. "If those are the terms," I said calmly, "then I accept being unwelcome. I will not compromise my health or my grandmother's to make you and Jason more comfortable with your choices." My mother stood up, her face flushed with anger. "I always knew you were selfish, but I never realized just how much until now. Come on, Jason. We are done here." As they left, my grandmother moved to stand beside me, taking my hand in silent support. We watched through the window as they drove away, and I felt a complex mixture of grief and liberation. The family I had grown up in had never truly accepted me as I was. The realization was painful, but also freeing. I no longer needed to chase an approval that would always be withheld. "I am sorry it came to this," my grandmother said softly. "I am not," I replied, surprising myself with the truth of it. I think this clarity is actually a gift, even if it doesn't feel like one right now. I left for California that afternoon not to escape as I had 8 years earlier, but with a plan to return stronger and better equipped to build a new kind of family connection based on mutual respect rather than control. The flight back to California felt different from any previous journey between my past and present lives. This time, I wasn't fleeing from my family, but rather moving with purpose toward a new chapter that would include my grandmother, but not the toxic dynamics my mother and brother insisted on maintaining. When I landed in San Diego, my apartment felt simultaneously familiar and strange, as if it belonged to a different version of me. In many ways, it did. The person who had built this life had been running from her past. Now I was choosing to face it, albeit on my own terms. My first task was to speak with my employer about the possibility of working remotely from Boston for several months while helping my grandmother transition to her new living situation. I had been with the company for 5 years and had built a strong reputation, but I still approached the conversation with trepidation. To my relief, my boss was understanding. "We've been moving toward more flexible work arrangements anyway," she said. "Your team can function with you working remotely as long as you maintain your productivity and are available for video meetings during core hours." With that hurdle cleared, I turned my attention to practical matters. I would sublet my apartment, put most of my belongings in storage, and pack only what I needed for an extended stay in Boston. The process was both overwhelming and liberating, forcing me to evaluate what was truly important and what was simply accumulated clutter. Throughout these preparations, I maintained daily phone calls with my grandmother. Her health was stable, but my mother had escalated her attempts to disrupt our plans. She came by again yesterday with a doctor I've never met before. My grandmother told me during one call. She wanted him to evaluate me right here in my living room. I refused, of course. "That's completely inappropriate," I said, alarmed by this new tactic. "Did you call Mr. Patterson?" "I did. He's documenting everything. He doesn't think she has any legal grounds, but he says it's good to keep records of these incidents." I doubled my efforts to complete my arrangements, quickly concerned about leaving my grandmother to face these pressures alone. Within 10 days, I had organized my life for an indefinite absence from California, said goodbye to friends with promises to stay in touch, and boarded a plane back to Boston. The month-to-month apartment I had rented was small but functional, located just a few blocks from my grandmother's house. I set up a modest home office and established a new routine that included daily visits with my grandmother, regular exercise at a local gym, and remote work for my marketing firm. My mother, true to her threat, made no attempt to contact me directly. Instead, she channeled all her controlling energy toward preventing my grandmother's move. She showed up at medical appointments uninvited, attempted to schedule competing consultations with specialists my grandmother had never agreed to see, and even contacted the assisted living facility directly to express concerns about her mother being manipulated into the decision. The facility administrators experienced with family dynamics around senior transitions handled these interventions professionally. They arranged for an independent social worker to conduct an additional assessment of my grandmother, which conclusively demonstrated her capacity to make her own decisions. 2 weeks before the scheduled move date, my mother made her most desperate attempt yet. She filed an emergency petition for guardianship, claiming my grandmother was being unduly influenced and was incapable of managing her own affairs. This required a formal court hearing, which was scheduled for the following week. My grandmother was initially shaken by this legal maneuver. "I never thought she would go this far," she said, her hands trembling slightly as she reviewed the court documents Mr. Patterson had brought over. "She's my daughter. How can she do this?" The hurt in her voice broke my heart. No matter how prepared we had been for my mother's resistance, the reality of having your own child attempt to legally strip you of autonomy was devastating. "She believes she's doing what's right," I said gently, though I struggled to find any justification for such extreme actions. "She's convinced herself that controlling others is a form of love." The court hearing was brief but intense. The judge, an older woman with sharp eyes and little patience for family drama, reviewed the medical evaluations, my grandmother's cogent testimony, and my mother's increasingly emotional claims. Mrs. Anderson, the judge addressed my mother firmly, the court finds no evidence whatsoever that your mother lacks capacity to make her own decisions. In fact, her choice to move to an assisted living community with appropriate medical support demonstrates sound judgment given her health conditions. Your petition is denied. My mother's face flushed with anger, but before she could speak, the judge continued. Furthermore, I am concerned by the pattern of behavior described in these proceedings. The court strongly cautions against any further attempts to interfere with your mother's autonomy. Such actions could potentially be viewed as elder harassment. Outside the courtroom, my mother finally confronted me directly for the first time since I had refused her compromise. I hope you're satisfied, she hissed, her voice low but venomous. You've turned my own mother against me and made a mockery of our family in public. I had prepared myself for this moment, rehearsing calm responses to her accusations, but what came out surprised even me. Mom, I said quietly, this has never been about you or me or some family competition. This is about Grandma having the right to make her own choices, just as I have the right to make mine. The real question is why that threatens you so much. She stared at me, momentarily speechless, and in that brief silence I glimpsed something I had never seen before: fear. Behind all her controlling behavior, her favoritism, her manipulation, was a deep-seated fear of losing control, of being abandoned, of not being needed. The realization didn't excuse her actions, but it helped me understand them in a way I never had before. This wasn't just about me or my grandmother or even Jason. This was about my mother's own unresolved issues that she had projected onto her family for decades. I've always loved you, Mom, I added softly, but I can't let that love destroy my health or my sense of self anymore, and I won't let it happen to Grandma either. Something flickered across her face, pain recognition, perhaps even a moment of clarity, but it was quickly replaced by the hardened expression I knew so well. You've always thought you were better than the rest of us, she said. Now you've got what you wanted. I hope it was worth it. She walked away, her back rigid with anger, and I felt a complex mixture of grief for the relationship we might have had, and relief that I was finally free from seeking an approval that would never come. The day my grandmother moved into Riverside Gardens was bright and clear, a perfect New England autumn day, with leaves turning golden in the sunlight. The staff welcomed her warmly, helping us arrange her furniture and personal items in the spacious one-bedroom apartment that would be her new home. It feels right, she said, looking around at the space with satisfaction. Like a fresh start. I squeezed her hand. It is a fresh start. For both of us. Over the following months, my grandmother flourished in her new environment. The consistent medical oversight helped stabilize her blood pressure and cholesterol levels. The social activities introduced her to new friends with shared interests. The balanced meals provided by the dining service supported her improved health without requiring her to cook for herself. I remained in Boston, extending my remote work arrangement indefinitely. My marketing firm, impressed with my continued productivity, eventually offered me a position on the East Coast team, allowing me to transition to a permanent arrangement closer to my grandmother. My mother and Jason maintained their distance, though I occasionally received updates through mutual acquaintances. Jason had apparently begun seeing a therapist, prompted by relationship difficulties that stemmed from the same controlling behaviors he had learned from our mother. It was a small but significant step that gave me hope he might eventually find his own path toward healthier relationships. My mother was less receptive to change. She had apparently told extended family members that I had stolen her mother away and turned her against her only daughter. The narrative was so far from reality that I couldn't even feel anger anymore, only sadness for the relationships she was sacrificing to maintain her illusion of control. 1 year after my return to Boston, my grandmother celebrated her 81st birthday with a small gathering in the community room at Riverside Gardens. She looked years younger than when I had first reconnected with her movements more fluid, her face less strained. I never thought I could feel this good at my age, she confided as we shared a pot of tea after the party. I just wish your mother could see that these changes have been positive. Maybe someday she will, I said, though I wasn't sure I believed it. My grandmother studied my face thoughtfully. You know, I've been thinking a lot about family lately, about what makes a real family. It isn't just blood, is it? It's about who supports you becoming your best self, who celebrates your joy instead of resenting it. Her words resonated deeply with the journey we had both been on. That's exactly it, I agreed. Real family lifts you up instead of trying to keep you down. I'm proud of you, Georgine, she said, reaching for my hand. Not just for how you've transformed your health, though, that's remarkable. I'm proud of your courage in breaking the cycle and choosing wholeness, even when it was painful. Her words brought unexpected tears to my eyes. This was the maternal approval I had sought for so long, not based on compliance or self-sacrifice, but on authentic growth and self-respect. In that moment, I realized that while I had lost the family I was born into, I had gained something more valuable, a relationship based on mutual respect and genuine care rather than control and conditional acceptance. The path had not been easy, and there were still moments of grief for what might have been if my mother and brother could have accepted me as I was. But I no longer carried the burden of responsibility for their feelings or choices. I had learned perhaps the most important lesson of all, that loving yourself enough to choose health and wholeness is not selfish, but necessary, not just for your own well-being, but for creating authentic connections with others who value the real you. As I reflect on this journey now, I wonder how many others out there have faced similar struggles with family members who cannot celebrate their growth. Have you ever had to choose between your well-being and someone else's comfort with the status quo? Did you find the courage to prioritize your health despite resistance from those who claim to love you? Share your experiences in the comments below, and if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that. Choosing their health is not selfish, but brave. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that sometimes the family we create through chosen connections is more nurturing than the one we're born into.